Let me describe your Tuesday. You woke up at 2 a.m. Maybe you fell back asleep. Maybe you didn't. Either way, by 10 a.m. you were fine, functional, caffeinated, managing. And then 3 p.m. arrived and you wanted everything in the kitchen. Not because you didn't eat enough, not because you have no willpower, but because at 2 a.m. last night, your cortisol spiked, and that spike set off a hormonal cascade that didn't end when you went back to sleep. It's been running all day. The cravings, the belly that won't budge no matter what you eat, the irritability at 4 p.m. that feels disproportionate to everything, the emotional flatness by evening. These aren't separate problems. They are the downstream of one upstream event. And today, we're following that cascade all the way through. Welcome to the Perimenopause Reset. I am Miriam, functional nutritionist, gut hormone specialist, and the person who refuses to gaslight intelligent women about their bodies. If you are a woman over 40 and your doctor said, just stress, while your body said, this is something else, you heard your body right. No advice built for male metabolism, no protocols designed for your 20-something self, just the truth about your gut hormone connection, your nervous system, your rhythm, your nourishment, and how you reclaim the power that's already yours. This is where midlife gets real. So let's go. We're in March, and our theme this month is rhythm restoration, circadian realignment. If you are new here, that means we are spending this month addressing what happens when your body's internal clock gets fractured by perimenopause, menopause, and what it actually takes to rebuild it. Now, last week, if you've been following along, last week's session covered the 2 a.m. wake up specifically, the cortisol, adrenaline, blood sugar cascade, the archetype signatures, and the cortisol countdown breath practice. Now, if you haven't listened or joined us in our Nourish and Flow circle for that yet, it lives inside of our online community. So I want to invite you to go ahead and find it. Now, today I want to go somewhere that episode pointed toward, but it didn't have time to fully unpack. What happens after the 2 a.m. cortisol spike resolves? Because listen, here's what most women don't know. Elevated cortisol has a half-life. It doesn't just turn off when the crisis passes. It circulates. It binds to receptors. It alters how other hormones behave. It sends messages to your liver, your gut, your brain, and those messages echo through the entire next day. We talk about cortisol like it's a stress hormone that spikes and disappears. But in a body where the HPA axis is chronically sensitized, which is essentially every perimenopause body that hasn't done the regulatory work, cortisol doesn't disappear. It dysregulates. And dysregulated cortisol does three things that will explain most of what you're experiencing in your body right now. It rewires your hunger. It drives your weight, specifically visceral weight in the belly area. And it destabilizes the neurochemistry that governs your mood, your motivation, and your emotional resilience. one by one. Your hunger is governed by two primary hormones, ghrelin and leptin. You've probably heard of them. What you may not know is how completely cortisol hijacks them. Ghrelin is your hunger signal. When ghrelin rises, you feel hungry. When it drops, you feel satisfied. Leptin is your satiety signal, fullness. It tells your brain that you have enough stored energy, that you can stop eating, that you are not in a crisis. In a normally regulated body, these two hormones work in a responsive, balanced rhythm. You eat, leptin rises, hunger quiets, you move through your day without obsessing over food. Now, here's what happens when cortisol is chronically elevated. Cortisol directly stimulates ghrelin production. More cortisol, more ghrelin, more hunger. That's not a metaphor, that's receptor binding. Your body is being told to eat, not because it needs more calories, but because cortisol is signaling a survival threat, and the body's response to perceived threat is to fuel itself. At the same time, cortisol induces leptin resistance. Your cells stop responding to the satiety signal. You can have adequate leptin in your bloodstream, enough to technically tell your brain you're full, and still feel like you cannot stop eating because the message is being blocked. And here's where perimenopause adds another layer. Estrogen plays a significant role in maintaining leptin sensitivity. As estrogen becomes erratic, leptin resistance compounds. So you're dealing with cortisol driving hunger up, estrogen allowing satiety resistance to take hold, and a nervous system that has been running a low grade threat response since 2 a.m. Is it any wonder that by 3 p.m., you're standing at your kitchen counter eating crackers you didn't even want? That is not a willpower failure. That is a hormonal instruction your body is following precisely. There's also a specific food preference cortisol creates that I want to name: high fat, high sugar, high carbohydrate foods. This is not accidental. Cortisol, as a stress mobilization hormone, signals the body to seek the most energy dense foods available. In ancestral biology, that made sense. A threat required rapid fuel. In modern menopausal biology, it means that at 3 p.m. on a stressful Tuesday, your body is going to want the most caloric thing in arm's reach, and it is going to want it urgently. This is metabolic literacy in practice. The craving, okay, it is a perfectly executed hormonal instruction being fired in the wrong context. Now let's talk about the belly, okay? I hear this from women every week. Excuse me. I've changed what I eat. I haven't changed how I exercise. But in the last 2 years, something has settled around my middle that was not there before and will not leave no matter what I do. That is visceral adiposity driven by cortisol. Now, here's the physiology: visceral fat, the fat that accumulates around your abdominal organs, not subcutaneously under the skin, has a high concentration of cortisol receptors. It is literally designed to respond to cortisol signaling. And when cortisol is chronically elevated, that fat depot becomes a preferential storage site. Your body is not distributing weight randomly. It is following cortisol's instructions to store energy in the most metabolically accessible location, close to the organs that need rapid fuel and a threat response. Your belly is a stress response organ. It is doing its job. Now, here's the part that makes most women feel completely betrayed by conventional advice. High intensity exercise raises cortisol. Significant caloric restriction raises cortisol. Chronic sleep debt, which is what 2 a.m. wake ups create, raises cortisol. So, the standard playbook for belly fat, eat less, do more cardio, push harder, is well, is for a cortisol driven pattern in perimenopause, actively making the driver worse. You are not failing the prescription is wrong for your physiology. Now, there's a second mechanism worth understanding here. Cortisol elevates insulin, not directly, but through a chain of events. Cortisol raises blood glucose through gluconeogenesis. Elevated blood glucose requires insulin. Chronic insulin elevation promotes fat storage and inhibits fat release. This is why cortisol wired and insulin inflamed patterns so frequently co occur in the same woman. Chronic cortisol elevation is one of the primary upstream drivers of insulin resistance in perimenopause and menopause. The belly you're fighting is not a nutrition problem. It is a cortisol insulin problem, and it requires a cortisol first solution. This is the one that feels the most personal and the one that women are least likely to connect to cortisol. The irritability that arrives at 4 p.m. like a weather system, the emotional flatness by evening, the crying in the car over something small, the disproportionate response to a work email, the sense that your emotional resilience, the thing you built over decades of managing hard things, has thinned to almost nothing. That is neurochemistry, and cortisol is at the center of it. Cortisol and serotonin have an inverse relationship. When cortisol is chronically elevated, serotonin synthesis is suppressed. Serotonin is your emotional steadiness, your sense of general well being, your capacity to handle difficulty without being destabilized by it. When it drops, everything feels harder. Reactions feel bigger. Recovery feels slower. Cortisol also disrupts dopamine signaling, specifically the dopamine pathways associated with motivation, reward, and the ability to feel satisfaction. This is why a woman in a chronically elevated cortisol state can accomplish genuinely impressive things during her day and feel nothing. No satisfaction, no sense of completion, just the next task and the dread that she's already behind on it. And then there's the estrogen layer. Estrogen modulates serotonin receptor sensitivity and promotes serotonin synthesis. As estrogen becomes erratic in perimenopause and menopause, the buffer it provides to the cortisol serotonin relationship fluctuates too. High estrogen day, that's more serotonin responsiveness, slightly better mood cushion. Low estrogen day, cortisol hits serotonin harder and faster. This is why emotional symptoms in perimenopause and menopause feel so inconsistent. It's not that you're unstable, it's that the hormonal buffer is variable. Some days the system holds, some days it doesn't. And without understanding the mechanism, you're left wondering what you did wrong on the bad days. You didn't do anything wrong. The cortisol load from the previous night's disrupted sleep interacted with a low estrogen window. That is a biochemical event, not a personal failure. I want to put a name to the full picture I've just described because one of the most powerful things I can give you is the ability to recognize your own pattern. The cortisol wired metabolic archetype is the most common pattern I see in women in perimenopause. And if you've been nodding through this episode, there's a reasonable chance this is your primary pattern. Here's what the full profile tends to look like. Sleep. Difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep. 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. wake ups with an activated mind. Feeling wired at night and unrefreshed in the morning, regardless of hours slept. Energy. A functional morning. You can get things done, followed by a significant crash in the early to mid afternoon. A second cortisol lift in the evening that keeps you going past when you should be winding down. Hunger, appetite suppressed or manageable in the morning, increasing and sometimes difficult to manage by afternoon. Strong cravings for sweet, salty, or carbohydrate dense foods, specifically in the 3 to 6 p.m. window. Weight. Stable or even slim in the upper body. Accumulation specifically in the abdomen and lower waist that is resistant to diet and exercise intervention. Mood. High functioning and competent in the first half of the day, progressively more reactive, depleted, or emotionally flat in the second half. Disproportionate emotional responses late in the day, recovery from stress slower than it used to be. Nervous system. A persistent background hum of low-grade urgency. Difficulty truly relaxing even when circumstances allow it. The sense that your body hasn't gotten the message that things are okay. Does that land? I want to be precise here. Recognizing yourself in this description is not the same as confirming your pattern. About 40% of women in menopause are carrying a cortisol wired presentation alongside a second archetype, estrogen stuck, insulin inflamed, or T3 downregulated. And the secondary pattern changes the protocol. What works for pure cortisol wired can be actively unhelpful for cortisol wired with an insulin inflamed driver underneath. The quiz and the description accounts for that dual pattern reality. It's 3 minutes, it's free, and it gives you your specific combination, which is the information you actually need to stop guessing. I want to close with this. Everything I've described today, the hunger rewiring, the visceral fat storage, the mood destabilization, is not a fixed feature of perimenopause and menopause. It is a fixed feature of unaddressed cortisol dysregulation. Those are different things. Perimenopause is a hormonal transition. Cortisol dysregulation is a regulatory failure that perimenopause can trigger, but that the body has the capacity to recover from when you give it what it actually needs. What it needs is not less food or more discipline. It is not another supplement layered onto a dysregulated system. It is not a harder workout at the wrong time of day for the wrong reason. It is rhythm, predictable circadian signals that tell the HPA axis the threat is resolved and it can stop. It can stop sounding the alarm. When the alarm quiets, when cortisol comes back to a functional diurnal pattern, ghrelin and leptin recalibrate. Visceral fat storage signals shift. Serotonin and dopamine pathways stabilize. The whole cascade unwinds from the top. That is why what rhythm restoration is about. That is what it's about, okay? That is why it is the second phase of my try-shift method framework after the nervous system is stabilized and before nourishment interventions are introduced. Sequence is not aesthetic. Sequence is physiological. Now, if you want to know your specific pattern, your primary and secondary archetype, and what that combination means for your protocol, my gut hormone quiz is the place to start. That link is also going to be in the show notes and description. Now, if you're not yet in our Nourish and Flow circle, I want you to come join us. Okay, it is free. This is where we have our Wind Down Wednesday sessions that happen every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time, where the rhythm work gets done in community and where you have access to me and to women who are doing exactly this alongside you. The community is free. The link is in the show notes and description. I want to thank you for being here. Thank you for refusing to accept the story that your body is failing you. It isn't. It's communicating with precision. You are just finally learning to read it. I'm Miriam. This is the Perimenopause Reset, and I will see you next week.